Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.19 ADC tier list. So if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a huge amount of changes to this patch. Obviously, almost every single item got nerfed or adjusted within the game, and that has left a pretty big impact on the ADC role as a whole. In general, most ADCs are down. A lot of them have been hit directly by the likes of IE and Collector being quite aggressively increasing in their price. It makes it quite hard to like snowball and spike into these items. Alongside this, we also saw on-hit items get a bit better, with them not being nerfed as hard as some of the other options. Mages are, in fact, doing quite well in the bot lane at the moment. I will cover that as we get higher up in the tier list. But the main things here are on-hit marksman doing it better, IE and crit marksman doing a bit worse, and mages definitely finding more of a place in the bot lane role. The D tier is going to consist of one champion at the moment, and that is Aphelios. He's being buffed in 14.20. He just didn't really find his footing this patch. He really lost a lot with the crit items being nerfed. I believe Yoon Towers should be a good item on Aphelios, and with the changes to it next patch and him being buffed, we should definitely see Aphelios rise back up as being a decent ADC. And I think with the 14.20 changes, he might be in one of the better spots he's been in a while. The C tier is going to consist of most of the champions. In fact, we've got the likes of Xayah, who's been underperforming for a while. Throughout almost all of last split, she was definitely on the weaker side. Losing Navori Quick Blades into Flicker Blades now was a substantial nerf towards her. She never really came back up as a good option. If you're playing her into certain compositions, she can definitely have value, but overall, she remains in the C tier at the moment, still definitely under par compared to some of the other marksman options. Tristana got a mini rework this patch. She had a lot of things changed about her, mostly focused around increasing her range, making her a stronger bot lane option, taking away some of that level scaling, and really, yeah, just opening her up as an option down in the bot lane role, rather than just being a dominant mid laner, which she had been for a while, coming up as like the main pick in competitive. Obviously, she got nerfed down quite aggressively, which really hurt her in the ADC role. She jumps up from the D tier to the C tier after the hotfix buffs to her. Her win rate is still pretty deflated at the moment, but I imagine it will rise up as people will start moving over to other builds. Both IE and Essence Reaver look like good first item rush options on her, so definitely look into some of the build varieties she has access to. Zeri has been underperforming ever since they nerfed her passive quite aggressively. That combined with some of the items getting a bit weaker for her, she's progressively gone downhill. She was considered one of the better picks alongside Jinx during the hyper carry meta, but we're kind of gone away from that now, and yeah, Zeri took a big hit, so she drops all the way down to the low end of the C tier. Caitlyn is being buffed in 14.20. She also was a big loser of the crit changes. She kind of akin to Aphelios, definitely benefits when IE and the likes of Collector are doing a bit better. But yeah, these items have been quite aggressively increasing their gold cost, so she has gone down a slight bit. Samira, also going to be over my C tier. Another champion, pretty aggressively nerfed by the Collector and IE nerfs. Lucian doing a bit worse this patch. He drops from the B tier down to the C tier. I'd still have him over the other C tier champions here. I just don't think he quite competes with the B tier options, which is why I have him in this tier. Obviously, it comes down to what synergies you want to pair with him, but he wasn't as affected as some of the other picks here. He's just not quite a B tier option, but still a high C tier option. Smolder, not a huge fan of this champion. I think he is very prohibitive in what he provides to the team. Very much kind of relying on playing around his 225 stack mark to really obviously get a huge amount of damage from his kit. Having access to that execute and true damage is very valuable to him. Pre that, he can feel quite weak, quite underwhelming as a champion, can definitely diminish the value of a pick like this, and I think he obviously can still function in mid and low elo, as obviously games go on for a longer duration, and that can really benefit him. But overall, I was still not a huge fan of this pick. I wouldn't really recommend it unless it was to get buffed more recently, unless it gets buffed in like recent future patches rather. But yeah, with the nerfs it received in 14.18 obviously being a concern for Worlds, we did just see Chovy in fact play and have a decent amount of success in the mid lane. But as a bot laner, not something I'd really recommend as much. He sits within my C tier. Other two champions here, we have Sivir and Kalista. So Sivir doing a bit worse this patch, obviously relies on crit items as well, and them being nerfed does hurt her. So she drops from the B tier down to the C tier. In Callista's case, she's very good in high elo at the moment. I've just always not been, I mean, I've never really been a fan of promoting this champion for mid and low elo, as obviously she's very hard to pilot, tends to be pretty reliant on synergies. But if you're very comfortable on Callista, she's in a considerably better spot this patch than she was in the previous patch. Definitely something you can like put some games into, really learn, and yeah, she can be quite valuable to drafts, especially with some of the unique things she brings towards the brings to the table as an ADC pick, whether that being like her great execute capability with her E, her early game pressure and mobility, her collective or like her ability to synergize really well with certain support pairings. There's a lot of value to a champion like Callista, and yeah, she's very deserving of the highest tier, highest spot in my C tier. Moving on to the B tier, so we have Ezreal, who was for a while at the top of my C tier. He's doing relatively neutral with the changes this patch. Obviously, Grudge was quite a big thing for him, as that no longer has lethality on scaling on it, when Ezreal never really built lethality, so it always felt quite bad in the past. But it's definitely something he can opt into now. But things like Trinity, Manamune, Spirit of Shojin, all still look like really good items on him. He's obviously pretty hard to pilot, really reliant on landing his skill shots, utilizing his passive to its full extent, but he kind of sits above the rest of the C tier, which is why I have him moved up to the B tier at the moment. Yasuo is being buffed in 14.20, but he's still doing a bit better in the bot lane role than he is in the mid lane and the top lane. He traditionally has done for a while, in fact, as he is very good into most ranged champions, being able to really utilize Windwall and his high mobility to get close onto them. Twitch has been underperforming, or I mean, was kind of on the weaker side in the previous patch, but now really beginning to underperform. He probably sits towards the low end of the B tier, if anything. This champion, obviously very solo queue bound, very reliant on finding the angles where he can like open up with his ultimate and not just instantly get blown up. There is less damage in the game, which does help for his more like his range and his extended fight patterns, but he has also himself lost a decent amount of damage, i.e. being more expensive has also hurt him, so he does drop from like a low A tier to like a mid to low B tier pick now. Draven, if you're really comfortable with this pick, he's still very valuable. If you're not comfortable, just don't play him. I think it really comes down to that. But the more time you put into Draven, the more comfortable you feel on this champion, being able to snowball your advantages, getting ahead, getting leads, getting your item spikes, all that can really equate to like a really valuable champion. And if you don't, then this pick can really feel quite flat within games, as it very much relies on its pressure with snowballing to be able to siege and then close out games. Draven, yeah, once again, if you're very comfortable on it, can be really valuable. If you're not, something worth avoiding. Varus doing a lot better this patch. The on-hit not being hit as hard really helped that build, and lethality had already kind of faded away in the previous patch with the huge nerf to the Q bonus AD ratio, which went from like 150 to 190 to 130 to 170, I want to say. That was a huge amount of power siphoned out of that ability. And yeah, the on-hit build has really taken up as being like his primary way to go. And very solid B tier pick. So Varus going to be here now. And Jinx drops down from the S tier, I think I had her as in my 40.18 tier list, to B tier. She is actually one of the biggest losers this patch in the ADC role, also being directly hit by a lot of the marksman crit item nerfs. The likes of IE, once again, Collector, if you're going like for a Collector IE opportunity variation, all three of these items got nerfed for her quite aggressively, so she drops from the S tier down to the B tier. Moving on to the A tier then, so we've got some new additions. We have Syndra, who has gained a bit of popularity in the ADC bot lane role. I kind of interchange the two, even though it's obviously technically AD carry, so it doesn't really make a huge amount of sense, but yeah, bot lane, Syndra has really been taking over as a really solid option. I don't think it's as good as some of the other AP options here. In fact, I think it's probably one of the worst ones you can go to, but it's more valuable for its flex potential, albeit all the others have a level of flex potential, so also kind of not as valuable in that space. But yeah, definitely on the rise as being like a solid option. And she's not bad by any means. She does outperform a lot of the current marksmen, mostly because a lot of the tools which AP champions have access to got buffed, and a lot of the marksmen got more heavily nerfed. Syndra really benefiting from Luden's Companion being strong at the moment, Storm Surge being strong at the moment. Obviously, both these items are being nerfed in 14.20, so she will lose quite a bit of power from that, and I imagine she'll just fade out from the bot lane role altogether. But she sits as like a low 80 option, so if you enjoy Syndra, you can definitely play her in the bot lane now. Nyla, once again, a bit situational. Obviously, is getting slightly buffed in 14.20, I guess you could say, with the E cast time now being snap rather than a 0.1 second delay, which does actually take some skill expression away from the champion, being unable to like buffer things like Blitzcrank Hook, for example. So that does hurt a bit, but if this enables the EQ combo to feel a bit more consistent, then I imagine it will overall be a bit power positive. Nyla did lose a bit of power this patch. She drops on like a high A tier to like a mid and low A tier option, but she's still very good when you pair her with the likes of Tarek, who isn't actually being enough in 14.20 anymore, so can still be very strong in that kind of a duo. MF, if she wasn't as easy as she was to play, then I think she'll probably drop down to the B tier. She is kind of hanging on in the A tier. I'd actually have her below Nyla, I reckon. Got nerfed quite aggressively in 14.18 for concerns that she would be a dominant pick at Worlds. BT also being nerfed did hurt her going into that patch, so lost a decent amount of power there. She's still decent though, like she can be pretty valuable in a lot of situations, especially with like Rel, Alistar, Leona combos, where you can really utilize your full kit with like E and R to like chain a lot of damage down. The main problem with the pick, obviously, is the fact that she doesn't have great hyper carry potential compared to a lot of other of the marksman options, and she didn't benefit from like, the likes of on-hit items being buffed or like not being nerfed as hard. I keep referring to them as buffed, but every item realistically got nerfed a substantial amount. So yeah, MF didn't benefit from it as much, and she still sits as like a low A tier option. Vayne is finally a viable champion again. Had been pretty bad in the bot lane for a while. I think she was like people were like underrating her to a degree. Like she wasn't actually unplayable. I'm being kind of hyperbolic there, but she definitely wasn't doing too well. She was a short range marksman with relatively single target damage. On hit items weren't as great, but now that they haven't been nerfed as hard, she's definitely found her footing more within the bot lane meta. So Vayne definitely doing pretty well at the moment. If you really enjoy this champion, then now is the best time to play it in the bot lane. Obviously, she does have some level of flex potential, and we have seen some like grasp, sudden impact variations pop up elsewhere. Grasp being nerfed for range champions will probably just kill that altogether, but yeah, she's doing a bit better at the moment. Very solid A tier pick. Ziggs, another one of the AP options, great for his siege potential. He tends to be a bit less reliable than some of the other AP picks. His damage obviously comes from his long range skill shots, which have a level of variation, variables and variations which come with it, like whether that's being able to consistently land them. So if you're just throwing Qs out for the sake of throwing Qs out and you're not getting damage down, then this champion doesn't actually perform anywhere near as well. So making sure you're like hitting Qs with the wave onto the player, like chaining a lot of damage together, whether that's through like WE or EQ combos with the slow, and then utilizing your ult to either shove waves, look for those teamfight angles. Whereas this champion's pretty deceptively skillful, and yeah, I still think he's a pretty good pick, especially if you once again put a decent amount of time into him. Lux is also another addition to the bot lane role, so I mean, I noticed in previous patches that Lux had always had some level of a player base in the bot lane. I just didn't really feel comfortable adding it to the bot lane tier list because there wasn't enough of an incentive to really promote this as a pick, because obviously it's just a lot of people who like playing Lux and then just want to play her in the bot lane, not any sort of like meta or like even really niche kind of audience. It was, yeah, just Lux players from mid and support playing her in the bot lane. But now she's kind of jumped up to another tier of being like viable. She's actually like a decent bot lane pick and something I will just promote now. So if you enjoy playing Lux, she's been good in both mid and support for a while, but now she's also pretty good as a bot laner. So if you feel comfortable playing this champion, then yeah, there's definitely value to having it in the bot lane. Whether that's either, yeah, for its flex potential, you want to get it out of like a bad matchup in the mid lane, you're not really comfortable having it in support and you want to pair it with something else. Obviously, she really wants lockdown, because the more lockdown she has, the more consistently she can land her QER combos, which obviously provides her with a lot of burst damage. If you pair with the right things and you snowball advantages, then this champion can be really valuable to a draft. So I really do think she is a very solid A tier pick. My other two marksmen here are Ashe and Kaiser. So Ashe doing a bit better this patch. Obviously can kind of dabble into the on-hit sphere of items, and yeah, she's doing a bit better off that. She's also pretty easy to play, having very like linear skill shots through W, through R. Her most skill obviously comes from like her kiting capabilities and making sure you're spacing, utilizing your slowing passive to output as much damage as possible. E is obviously very powerful if you're utilizing the vision correctly on that ability. In Kaiser's case, she is probably number 2 marksman at the moment. I don't know, she's number 3 marksman. I think the other two are actually pretty clear favorites. But if you can really get an advantage on Kaiser, her damage output makes it really hard to itemize against her, doing a level of physical, a level of magic, a level of percentage health damage, which means she has great tank shredding capabilities. Obviously, tank's more prevalent within the meta at the moment, and she really benefits from that. So Kaiser doing a lot better at the moment of that. Also has other build variations which she can drop into if she needs to. Yeah, she's a pretty solid A tier pick. Definitely something, if you're very comfortable on, can be really valuable addition to your draft. My 2 ADC picks in the S tier are going to be Kog'Maw and Jhin. Kog'Maw, I believe, to be the like more niche, underrated pick at the moment. I'm actually seeing a lot of people kind of like hop onto Kog'Maw though, so I don't know if he's as much underrated as he once upon a time was. PTA, Lethal Tempo, both look really viable on him. We've seen some like on hit with like AP Shadow Flame variants, which I don't know if they're quite as successful as just the standard traditional on hit. Like if you feel comfortable just playing the on hit variation, then you don't really need to dabble into the AP sphere as much, but it can definitely be something you opt into if obviously the enemy team is like your team is very AD heavy and you need a bit more AP, but obviously Kog'Maw just inherently does a lot of AP damage, so it doesn't really end up being much of a problem. So yeah, Jhin, a premier marksman of the patch. Obviously, he's the most popular marksman in the game by like a landslide, I'm pretty sure. And that's to no surprise. Static Shiv's really strong. IE still fine on him. RFC can be something you opt into. I mean, RFC, static RFC tends to be pretty traditional to item build. Obviously, that's pretty much coined as the Mosquito build at this point. If you want a bit more damage, you can still opt into Collector, and I don't think they're as good as they once upon a time were, with them being 2 of the largest nerfs towards these items, but Jhin, still doing really well at the moment. Very solid S tier pick. He is being nerfed in 14.20, and I do think this will open up Kog'Maw as being the premier marksman, especially if he continues to garner the player base which he is currently getting. And then I have 6 mages. Obviously, we all know what's kind of going on with the bot lane at this point, especially if you're someone who mains bot lane. You've probably noticed you're playing against a lot more AP. Seraphine, an incredibly powerful enchanter AP hybrid, doing really well this patch. Brand, I'm actually going to have the high end of my A tier. I don't think he's quite the S tier as like some of the other options here, but the other 4 I actually do think quite comfortably sit in the S tier. So yeah, Brand, great OE, tends to be a bit more bit more reliant on pairings, but that's like with the Nami to get that continuous epoch, so you can get the slow combined with your just 2 shots of AoE damage. Can be really valuable to drafts. And then Swain, a great champion at the moment. He was being nerfed in 14.20. I think we've actually removed that now, but his close range damage and oh my god, I'm fumbling words there. His ability to maintain pressure at close range with his fight tempo and maintaining that uptime is some of the best in the game. It's really hard to match Swain, especially with less damage in the game, making it harder to burst him down, making his art an incredibly valuable ability. It's one of the strongest in the game. The prohibition of Swain is obviously the fact that he doesn't quite have enough range to like compete with certain matchups and certain compositions, which is where he can kind of fall a bit flat. But more tanks in the game, marksman being a bit weaker, he's really thriving at the moment and very deserving of an S tier spot. Veigar's being nerfed in 14.20, but basically games go longer, he gets more stacks, he does more damage. AP champions are better at the moment, the itemization is better, and Veigar is just profiting off all of this, and yeah, he is very deserving of an S tier spot. Karthus has been a good bot laner for a while. Obviously, he's a bit less popular than the rest here, and honestly, he could also be dropped down to the A tier. I don't know if he's quite as valuable as some of these other champions to the draft, but his ultimate is also one of the strongest abilities in the game. He does a huge amount of single target damage, especially if you're getting isolated Qs. His wave clear is great. His sieging is kind of lackluster, and obviously if you fall behind in the game, then you're not going to have as much value as certain other champions, as he has no real hard CC. He has obviously soft CC and VW, which can be quite valuable with the magic resist shred, especially if you're pairing him alongside other AP champions. But pair him with an engaged support and you should be good to go. This champion's in a really good spot. And then Hui had been underrated for a while, and I'm really glad that I can finally move him up to the S tier. I do think this champion is genuinely broken in the bot lane, and honestly to a degree in the mid lane. Like, he's actually really coming up as like a really good mid laner. The itemization changes really benefited him. His utility, like his versatility combined with the amount of utility he has access to, make him really strong just across the board as like a mid and bot laner. There is a level of flex potential to support. I don't think he's quite as good support as, like, obviously his two other farming roles, which give him a bit more XP, but he can, still be flex there. Overall, the S tier, I'm really happy with at the moment. I think these champions are all very good in different situations. I think if you're looking for an AD champion to default on, Jhin should probably be the way you go. Kog'Maw is a bit more, Kog'Maw has more tank killing capabilities, which is where Jhin oftentimes falls a bit more flat. But, he doesn't quite have the same level of damage, especially early on to the game. Kog'Maw level 1 is also deceptively strong, though. Like, you can definitely find angles for Kog'Maw to be quite heavy in damage, but he's a bit more of this champion reliant on his W, whereas Jhin reliant a bit more on his ammo. So honestly, both these champions are a bit more have unique gameplay aspects to them, but they're both very strong, and I really do recommend picking them up. Overall, those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.